Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan Hermetz Pierce. Is Ukraine War frontline update for the 23rd of August 2023, and this one is just a segment taken out of my full news update, the second video of my news update this morning, because it was too long. I'm not going to do a full frontline update in the detail I normally do. I did this again yesterday. It's just that I've had my news videos have been too long, so I apologize. It will be a somewhat truncated frontline update, but it should give you all that you really need to know about what's happening, and a few pointers towards my next video, which will be on an analysis as to whether this counteroffensive is a success or not. Anyway, over to the previous segment I did earlier today. I talked to you in a previous news piece about an explosion in Crimea, and then I gave you further information that there was a radar system that had been hit, and now it turns out that this is potentially a really significant strike by the Ukrainians. So I'm going to go to this piece of news before I go to the frontline segment. So, spectacular operation by Ukrainian forces, says Tendar. This morning, a Ukrainian drone penetrated the Russian air defense and surveillance grid in Olenivka. So that's where we saw that white cloud previously. In Russian-occupied Crimea, the drone documented the destruction of a full S400 battery. So this is basic. There are S500s in potential in sort of prototype, but S400s are the best Russian air defense system, right? So this is in Crimea, and apparently the whole battery's been taken out. Don't know, but the claim is the whole battery along with its crew destroyed. Coordinates of the destroyed Russian battery here. So let's go and see where that is to give us some kind of context there. Geolocated to right on the western edge, and that makes a lot of sense because the Ukrainians are sending drones in this direction. They send drones out over the sea, and then they dogleg round to here so they don't have to fly over Russian occupied territories, so that they don't get taken out by air defense systems there. So they do this and then come along and hit Crimea, and so you're going to put your best air defense systems here to protect both Sevastopol and Crimea as a whole. So your S400 there is what we would expect. There are a range of Russian radar units stationed in this area, and not even one saw this coming. Well, obviously, it could well have come over the sea. Neither the drone nor the incoming missiles which destroyed them. It is unclear whether the Ukrainian drone was able to slip through because of clever electronic warfare tactics, or simply because of the well-known low quality of the Russian technology. Either way, it's an embarrassment for Russia once again. Congratulations on an excellent operation executed by the Ukrainian forces. Right, so the question is, how much did it destroy? There seems to be, I don't know whether it's a whole battery. Well, it probably is a whole battery here positioned. There's only one explosion on the video, and that doesn't necessarily tell us anything. It doesn't tell us whether there are any further explosions. There's a big old explosion that would have caused an awful lot of, I would have thought, debris to be fired out, and perhaps damaging other bits and pieces as well. Right. Then Tim White says Ukraine's intel say they have destroyed an S-400 Triumph missile system, not a bastion, near Olenivka in Crimea. They say the installation itself, its missiles, and enemy personnel were all destroyed, and they released this video. Russia says Harpoon or Neptunes were used from the sea. Okay, would have come in from the sea. They aren't fired from the sea though. But yes, I'd imagine that could be plausible. Now, Ukraine Weapons Tracker says a Russian S-400 air defense battery was targeted by Ukrainian forces in Cape Tarkankut, Crimea. At least one TEL, so that's Erector launcher, was hit and detonated, with other elements of the system nearby likely suffering damage. There being only this one piece of visual evidence at the moment, it doesn't mean that it all wasn't destroyed, because if you look to what the Russians say, Harpoon or Neptunes were used. So that's plural. If Tim White is correct there, then we have multiple hits. So, or potentially multiple hits. So I don't know whether a whole battery is destroyed or elements of the battery, but this is a massive success for the Ukrainians, because it opens up the ability for the Ukrainians to now start properly hitting Crimea, taking out elements in Sevastopol. Maybe I don't know how many air defense systems of this type, of this quality that the Russians have around Crimea. But if you're starting to see these elements get taken out, attrited, then things are not looking good for Crimea. This is a really significant hit. S-400 system, to lose one of these, especially if they've lost a whole battery, is absolutely massive. So do not underestimate the impact that this might well have. Anyway, let's move on to military aid. Not too long to spend on that. Spent way too long doing the update, the frontline update. So, Alexei Reznikov is saying it will take at least 6 to 7 months before Ukraine is ready to use F-16s. So that's going to, what are we now? September, October, November, December, January, February, March. So maybe March time, you might see them being used along the front line. Who knows? It could be a bit of psyops. It might happen earlier. The Netherlands has decided to provide Ukraine with nearly 1,000 portable charges for remote mine clearance, which can be used to carve out the passages in dense military fortifications. Ukraine's defense ministry has concerns. So portable. So they're obviously for individual people, I would have thought, to clear mined areas. So that's really good news. Croatia, I mean, Zelensky was in the Balkans yesterday doing so much important diplomatic work with places like Greece, Croatia, Serbia. Croatia is preparing a new defense package for Ukraine, which will contain important components, says no reports. The country is also ready to provide ports on the Danube and the Adriatic Sea for the transportation of Ukrainian grain, Volodymyr Zelensky said after a meeting with the Prime Minister of Croatia. That's excellent news. This is so I talked to you earlier about this in military aid because they've been given a bunch of these Rosamax. What are Rosamax? These are APCs from Poland. I don't think they've been given. Actually, they bought these. So Ukrainians bought these from the Polish, as far as I remember. They seem to be fairly decent. But when you're talking about how the Marder managed to fall down into a trench, I mean, look at some of the tiny windows you're having to look through. Yeah, you're going to have electronic viewing configurations, I would think as well. I'm no expert here, but you can imagine how easy it might be to just drive down a small trench, especially when the trench is overgrown from both sides, so you can't actually really see it. But yeah, he's looking through these little viewfinders, and yeah, I can imagine it's an easy mistake to make. Okay, Ukrainian Armored Equipment LLC, it's a limited company, has established a limited liability company, has established a joint production of 120 mortar ammunition with two NATO member countries at once. Ukrainian defense forces are already receiving thousands of new mortar rounds. They need basically 1 million of these. What was it? Andrew Perpetua is saying 1 million a month they need. Uh, yeah, insane numbers are needed for these. I think, was he saying that even at 1 million a month, they're only, or was it at 300,000 a month, they're only firing 20? Each mortar can fire 20 a day, and you do that in several minutes. So they use just huge numbers of mortars. Each mortar, whether it's self-propelled or the different size of mortar that you carry around with you, they fire them off very quickly. You see the pock-marked fields that I've shown you so many times is just evidence that a phenomenal amount of ordnance is required and is used. Okay, there I've talked to you about that. That wasn't, I don't think, what I would have been trying to show you. Oh well, it would have been something else. Nonetheless, we'll move on. And yeah, onto this. So this is Tatarigami talking about Russian drones here. Recently, our military encountered what appears to be a slightly modified version of the Russian loitering munition Kub. While I'm unable to share details, it appears that certain adjustments have been made to improve certain systems. The munition was equipped with a container containing explosive material, which, based on the markings, appears to be OKFOL. This primitive design allows Russians to mass produce these cheaply. We must address this threat with equally mass and affordable countermeasures soon. This is something that's been talked about a lot by people like Trentelenko. You need cheap, affordable, and lots of them to counter cheap and affordable and lots of them threats. Yes, you have your high high expense threats like a Kinjal that you will use things like the Patriot to take out. But when you have these drones that are being mass produced and the Russians are improving them over time, and improving can be making them cheaper. And slightly tinkering with the explosives, then you need the right thing to do the job in eliminating that threat. So we've seen Gepards being provided and used, and hopefully ammunition for them is more forthcoming. But there needs to be further thoughts as to combating this kind of threat. Now, moving on to something completely different, which is this. So this Ukraine has released footage from the test of a new unmanned underwater vehicle called Marichka. According to available information, the underwater drone has a range of over 1,000 kilometers. It can perform strike, transport, or reconnaissance missions. So I presume that means you can fit people inside it or transport cargo, but it can fire. Probably just explode as well and do reconnaissance. Now, I wonder why this footage is released. Like, this is telling the Russians very obviously we can hit with underwater munitions rather than hit them with them and Russia don't know about it. Maybe Russians have got spies and they knew about it anyway. And so it's just kind of, I don't know. I don't know why you would telegraph this, but they are. There must be a reason for that. And anyway, this could be a game changer. This could be why Russia are now sinking ferries around the Crimean Bridge to stop threats like this becoming a reality. It could be that the Black Sea Fleet is under threat, and significantly, it could be that submarines are under threat. Those release cruise missiles into Ukraine, of course. It depends how quiet this kind of vehicle is. You'd expect submarines would be easily able to deal with something like that. I would have thought, but I don't know. I don't know enough of the details. But that could be a game changer, or it could be a significant evolution of Ukrainian capabilities, or it could be trying to over-egg the capabilities that Ukraine has, so that Russia spend a lot of time and resources putting in mitigations to that unnecessarily. Right, let's move on to geopolitical stuff. So I think this is highly significant. German Foreign Minister, who's interestingly Green Party, I believe, says Ukrainian strikes on Moscow are legitimate. And I talked about this earlier, a bit of a moral dilemma going on with these. But German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock defended Ukraine's right to strike targets on Russian soil, saying that Kyiv acts within international law. Russia has attacked Ukraine, and therefore Ukraine has a right enshrined in the UN Charter to defend its country, to defend its people, Baerbock told a joint press conference with her Estonian counterpart. Russia is bombing civilian targets in Ukraine relentlessly, targeting grain silos, hospitals, and churches. Ukraine is defending itself within the framework of international law. I think that's really significant. Right. Russia could annex breakaway regions of Georgia, suggests former President Dmitry Medvedev, between drinking vodka. The former president, who signed a decree recognizing the independence of Abkhazia and South Ossetia in 2008 when they invaded Georgia and was sort of semi-annexed parts of it, says the idea of the regions joining Russia is still popular. This is, obviously highly controversial. I wonder what the Georgians think about that. Right. Russian authorities have filed a lawsuit against Andrei Melnichenko as they seek to seize and nationalize one of the companies in the billionaire oligarch's metals and mining empire. The sharks are feeding on their own blood, says Bill Browder here. This is reported by the Financial Times. This is really significant because it shows that the Russians are desperate for money if they're trying to seize oligarchs' assets and nationalize them. That shows that there is an economic desperation, I think, happening back in Russia. And then onto this. Now, excuse me, I'm not bashing Trump, but Donald Trump muses about fleeing to Russia in unprompted Truth Social posts. So just to remind viewers, he owns Truth Social. That's his own social network. It's really interesting that he would choose to say something like this. So he is at the moment had a $200,000 bond put on him from Fani Willis. He says the failed district attorney of Fulton County, Atlanta, Fani Willis, insisted on a $200,000 bond from me. Trump wrote on Monday night. Again, that's not out of the ordinary, but then the Truth Social post took a very weird turn, says Forbes. Quote, and this is Trump speaking, I assume, therefore, that she thought I was a flight risk. I'd fly far away, maybe to Russia, Russia, Russia. I don't know why he repeated that 3 times. Share a gold domed suite with Vladimir, never to be seen or heard from again, Trump continued. Uh, so on and so forth. He then says, would I be able to take my very understated airplane, scare quotes, understated airplane, with the gold Trump affixed for all to see? Probably not. I'd be much better off flying commercial. I'm sure nobody would recognize me, Trump continued. Uh, just, yeah, interesting that you would choose to talk about going to Russia. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know what that says. Right. Be warned about how people are framing things. Shashank Joshi, writing for The Economist, which is actually not too distant in its positioning. Oh, no, it's much more sort of UK and centrist, but Heritage Foundation is rather like the American Enterprise Institute, Cato Institute, who else? Lots of these different organizations is very much borderline libertarian, but very much pro corporatism, pro free market, pro free market more than corporatism, but it ends up looking like corporatism. Anyway, they've got a long history of disinformation on certain things, like, for example, climate science. Heritage Foundation, yeah, dodgy. And here is how they have framed America giving support to Ukraine. The Biden gave $700 dollars. I presume that's not just. I don't know. Biden gave $700 to Hawaii victims, but he took $900 from them and sent it to Ukraine. I don't know if that's talking per person. On the left is Kyiv, and on the right is Maui. And this is the idea that is a zero-sum game, something that I'm talking about quite a lot at the moment for American viewers. That actually, when you are giving Ukraine assistance, it is not money away from hospitals, or in this case, away from helping Maui. You can do both those things, because actually the monetary value given to the assistance to Ukraine is not prima facie obvious. Like, it's basically, if it's from drawdown, it's like, well, this is stuff we're going to get rid of. It's of this value if we were to make this stuff, but we're not making it. It's sitting in a warehouse and we're giving it. We're not spending money on disposing of it. We're just basically shipping that out to Ukraine, and we're going to put like a $30 billion price tag on that. But it's not like $30 billion from Maui support and sending that to Ukraine. And this is really spurious. It's really disingenuous. I hate organizations like the Heritage Foundation, so on. Like, there will be a lot of you viewers out there who sit on the right in of my American viewership, who would love the Cato Institute and love, Heritage Foundation, the American Enterprise Institute, and all the Heartland Foundation was the other one I was trying to think of. You love all those and the Koch brothers and whatever. It's not my cup of tea at all. And so this fits in with exactly how I've seen these guys operate previously with disinformation, and I don't like it at all. And luckily, Twitter readers have added context. Funding for Maui comes from local and state and tribal disaster reserves, Department of Interior and FEMA through the DHS. These funds are earmarked specifically for natural disasters in the US. Old weapons systems and or financial aid is not from domestic coffers. In other words, this is downright lying, right? And the Heritage Foundation they've got form for lying. So this is an old article from the Guardian, but you can find this kind of stuff everywhere. I've written articles myself on this. How vested interests tried to turn the world against climate science. So we know there's plenty of evidence to suggest these guys, Koch, Skype, Bradley, ExxonMobil, Marshall Institute, Competitive Enterprise Institute, Heartland Institute, Cato Institute, Heritage Foundation, Americans for Prosperity. We know that they have spent money on false science and covering up. In fact, there's now documentary evidence from the 70s now that people like ExxonMobil knew perfectly well about climate change and knew what the causes were for it, but then pumped out a load of disinformation because it was in their best interest financially to do so. So these guys are involved in disinformation. This is just another form of it because it suits their political economic agenda. Anyway, that's me getting off my soapbox, but I know some of you will be really triggered by what I've said. But do you know what? I've got some receipts for that, so I'm not really bothered by the criticism. Right, flash news here saying President of Portugal has arrived in Ukraine, so that's really good news. He's in Kyiv, and the president of Lithuania in Kyiv as well. This is great. Long must this continue. All of this diplomacy that's going on with Kyiv and with Zelensky to continue getting support from all these nations. Erdogan plans. So he's the Turkish premier. Plans to visit Russia to meet with Putin to discuss a grain deal, although the meeting was originally expected to take place in Ankara. So that is significant. Now, Shashank Joshi saying UK ambassador to Ukraine. People are waking up to this sense of what Russia really is, this colonial fascist leaning country. There is a dawning realization, not just for the West, but for other countries who saw that as a geographically different part of history. This is in the Kyiv Independent, but I think this is really significant for the UK ambassador to be saying this. This sense of Ukraine having been colonized under Soviet occupation, that is a narrative that is being understood by many other countries who have not been conventional partners of Ukraine, but are now very interested in the nature of this invasion. There's no war fatigue. You can see that in terms of the polling that we do of our own population. Support for government policy is very high. So 70% of the population believes the government is doing the right thing. That's really good numbers for the UK. This is the importance of really strong communication. So the UK have probably been quite good at communicating why it's important to support Ukraine. And we've got media that is generally on the side. If you exclude people like GB News, that's like the new Fox News that started up here, or Talk TV, that's Rupert Murdoch. If you forget those kind of fringes, then we've got a media that's very much supportive of the help of Ukraine. The US is different, and I don't think the US has done a good enough job of communicating either the US public as to how they support Ukraine, where the money's coming from, or even not coming from. It's just already there in terms of built equipment that is going to be scrapped anyway, sometimes or often. Kyiv Independent, what will the future of Russia look like after Ukraine's victory? And she said, oh God, I don't know what Russia will look like. Honestly, I don't care. I really don't. Interesting. And then finally, our actions so at the moment, the BRICS meeting, Putin has said, although he's not there, our actions in Ukraine are dictated by only one thing: to stop the war unleashed by the West and their satellites against the people living in Donbass. Like oh my God, it's like what Tucker Carlson said yesterday. This is not a war unleashed by the West. The West didn't unleash a war in Donbass. Russia sent little green men there in 2014 onwards and have admitted to an illegal war. So that's all you need to know. End of. Putin's admitted it. You guys are wrong. You've invaded a sovereign nation. It's disgusting, and I don't have any other time for it. So that's why I very strongly support Ukraine, but hopefully not in a way that means I am giving disinformation. That's the last thing I'd ever want to do. I'm hopefully being as objective as I can, given my biases. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Please take care. This has been a long one again. Real apologies, lots to talk about. Speak soon.